Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Becoming Without Limits. I am your host, Destiny. And for people who do not know me, I am 26 years old. I am neurodivergent, autistic female who's living in their 20s and balancing out life while being neurodivergent and navigating through different paths of my life. So, nothing in my life has been linear. And I'm just going to start off from the beginning of my life, just give you guys a journal synopsis before I start going down, and then why I started doing a podcast. So, for people who do not know me, and I said all the stuff I've already said before, I'm going to start off for where I was born. I'm a 2000s baby, and I was adopted at a very young age of 6 or 7. Not like this, but 6 or 7 years old. More preferably, I think it was 2007, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a really, really great thing for me. So, for people who want to have a generalized idea of my my path was never linear. So, ahead of time, I talk with my hands a lot. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a background with me, and then we're going to go into why I did this podcast. So, to start everyone off to think of this idea, so think of a, a straight line, think of a straight division of two sides, where I was born biologically by a mom and a dad, and I have on this side of my wall, I have two younger sisters, a lot of aunts, a lot of uncles, cousins, all that stuff on this side of the wall. And this was before I turned 5, 6, 7, like around that age of time frame. I don't really remember too much of it. And then when I got adopted, I have this side of my family that I call my family, and they have supported me from the very beginning. So I was defined as a non-verbal autistic when I was little. I didn't talk. I didn't do a lot with my voice. I did a lot of pointing, saying this, that, or like little words here and there. I would not be a big talker as for someone who used to go from nonverbal, who is nonverbal, to a very verbal person. So, as long as I can remember, I've always been neurodivergent, which is someone who thinks differently, who's creatively different, and for someone who was raised with different varieties of autism spectrum, because there's a whole wide line variety of what it's like to be autistic, to be on the spectrum. So, with me, I am something called a high functioning autistic. And I know with my generation, we're obsessed with labels, but these are the things that I was told that I was. So, and I don't, keep in mind, when I say all of these things, I don't let it define me at all to this day. But with me, I'm a high functioning autistic, which means in my eyes, I am someone who can do the task of any other person. It's just I navigate, or I so called learn differently than others. So, for a prime example of me, I can drive myself to home and work. I can work a 40-hour week. I can live in my own apartment. I can clean. I can cook. I can do some of the tasks that there's also the other side of high functioning autism. There is also the lower functioning side, which is where this group would need a little bit more assistance than this group. But to me, neurodivergent is neurodivergent, and everyone is beautiful in their own individualized path. So, outside of me being a high functioning autism person, I've always been a neurodivergent kid. I've always been curious. I've always been a studious kid. I've always been a rule follower, doing everything by the books. I was just that type of kid. So with me, as long as I can remember, I've always been neurodivergent. I've always learned differently. As soon as I started elementary school, I remember I got reading intervention, speech therapy, and a resource class. So I remember being in this horseshoe. Is It's the easiest way for me to describe it because I'm a visual learner. So for people who are on the spectrum and who understands like my terminology, when I got to elementary school, that's when they started developing an IEP, which is an individualized educational plan, which was a systematic plan that helped me create an education plan that is best for me to succeed and to go through to the next grade. I always had that. I've always had standardized testing. I always had different types of counseling and therapy and all those resources that helped me to build to who I am today. So as long as I remember, I've always had those ones. I had to do a hearing test when I was little because they thought something was wrong with my hearing, but then it just comes down to I was a selective hearer. I was just that type of person. I just sometimes things would go in one ear, out the other. I was a type of kid where I've always had a hard time with reading and writing comprehension, which is why reading intervention helped me out and resource. And I had mainly three in elementary school, which is speech, speech. Yeah, I had speech and language to help me out. I had reading intervention, and then I also had a resource class. So I think of it as a huge triangle. And I didn't think I'd come to realize with my ADHD, which is hyperact attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which basically means which means I have a lot of energy. I can't sit in one spot, and or as I call it, if you've watched that Looney Tunes show as a kid, or if you've ever watched it, it's like this short where there's a coyote. The coyote's always scheming, doing something against, I think it's an ostrich. It's a tall ostrich, and it always goes to the wolf and says, meet me, and then speeds on through. That is how I would best describe my ADHD because my brain would go a million miles an hour back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Meanwhile, it's trying to get one task done. But then, meanwhile, I'm working on that task. Then I start a whole new task, and then I never get the first task done. And then I'm just off going around doing so many things as I can and or want. And it started getting tiring after a while, but I that's still how my brain works. Sorry, one second. I had to do a drink break from a 7 brew I got earlier, but so good, so good. Got the ocean breeze one, but anyways, outside of my lovely drink I just had, I am also and with where were we? We were back towards after I did my elementary school days. So after I finished elementary school with the standardized testing, my resource class, my speech therapist, all these three resources that helped me, it slowly broke down from from those three to two. So instead of me having speech, resource, reading intervention, those three, it turned into resource and reading intervention. So I always remember when I was back in middle school with my resource classes that I would still be in a separate room, and that's when we started adding to my IEP extra. I don't remember if it was elementary or middle school. I started getting extra time for tests. So in other words, I would sit in a separate room with two or three people from my class with a para educator, and we would sit in this classroom and we would do our test, and we can take as long as we want to. Even if we don't finish the test during that class period, we can always save it for a different time. So where we would take it into our resource class and then we would deliver it to that said teacher. And during my time in middle school was when I started getting bullied a lot because that's where I started realizing, or I didn't even realize it, but now looking back at everything, I definitely had a lot of social interaction problems with my grade and my age group. So that's why I thought putting myself in a sport like lacrosse during middle school was going to help me make friends. And I just remember that People would say that they're my friends. People would say that I'm a really kind person, but unfortunately, those type of people would take advantage of my kindness, and they would either make fun of me behind my back, and I would find out from one of the girls I played lacrosse with, or I would find out through a random person just walking up in a cafeteria and tell me, "Oh, this person spoke about you. They're making fun of you, and they think it's so funny." And then I would go up to that person, I would confront them, and they would say the complete opposite. And I was always afraid in middle school to say something. So when I got to high school, I didn't really want the parents to be following me. I didn't want them around. I actually, at this time, is when I had a solid friend group, or at least I think so. But it was a friend group that I ended up going into my freshman year. And I don't know why I hung around them, but I'm still friends with some of them to this day. And my high school specifically, I'm not going to name my school for reasons, excuse me, but we had in my high school what we called the lobby kids. The lobby kids were a group of people that would hang out by the lobby, and we would just socialize and be our own like little quirky group. That's where as we call all of our natural autistic selves would go into this group, and we would all hang out. We would all be we were called weird as when we were teenagers, so I understood that part. But I was also the type of person where I had two different sides of me. So I had the part where I hang out with the lobby kids in the morning, and where I it would be like completely nerdy. We would have a fun time. We would listen to like EDM, rock, emo music, to where I would try to be hanging out with popular kids and the football players and the as we called it when we get to my high school, we called it the lax girls, the girls that played field hockey. I tried hanging out with them. And I know I played a little bit of lacrosse in freshman and sophomore year. As I was going through the lack of the social cues and the social interactions, I still had my IEP. My IEP still continued all throughout high school. And if I'm being honest, that's where my bullying went significantly worse. Was in high school. You're trying to fit, you're trying to get into the crowd. I thought it was smart my sophomore year to do a dance battle against I, I forgot if she was a junior or senior, and she was on the cheer squad or whatever. I went against that girl because the so and so popular kids or whoever dared me to do it. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying to look good in front of these people. These people think that they're my friend. They want me to do a dance battle against this person at my pep rally during sophomore year. And lo and behold, they filmed it, they spread it around the school. And by the time Monday came around, I became the class joke. And that's where it didn't make me feel happy and all of that type of stuff. And I was very appreciative of the support of the very few friends that I had when I was in high school during that time frame, because my sophomore and junior year were the worst for me. And that's where I had and that's where when I was 15, I ended up being diagnosed with anxiety, and I was already neurodivergent. I already had problems with social cues. I had a problem with reading and writing comprehension, and a little bit of the dyslexia came into play. And for people who don't know what dyslexia is, or reading and writing comprehension, with reading and writing comprehension basically means I can't write a summary to save my life when I'm reading a book. If I don't highlight the certain sections, or I have to read something a few times for it to make sense to me, then that's where my reading and writing and my dyslexia would come into play. Because sometimes I got confused on certain words, how to say it, and all of that type of stuff. So I became very scared on how to do certain things, which is where in high school I was taught. I forgot who she was or why I was talking to her, but I remember it went back to a triangle. I don't know why it went back into a triangle, but I remember I had to talk. I believe it was the social worker or someone in my high school that I had to talk to once a week. I spoke to her on top of having resource, on top of still having a reading intervention until my sophomore year. And then I stopped having reading intervention because they're like, okay, you know how to clearly read, you just can't summarize. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell people. And I took I call it a really awesome skills class called CWEDO. I have not figured out what it meant to this day in my high school, but I was learning how to write resumes, CVs. I learned what it's like to fill out a check. I learned what it's like to look at a lease, like all of these different life skills. So I'm very appreciative of that class because I don't think if I ever took that class in high school, I would never learn of some of the things that I'm doing now. Like, I know how to write a check out of a checkbook. I know exactly how to sign a rental agreement. Like, I know how to do all of these different things. And I think it was because of that class. But also during that time frame, I was horribly getting bullied in high school. And my breaking point was my junior year. There was this one person, and I openly felt like I had a target on my back all of junior year. Like, I was told a lot of pretty nasty things. I'm not going to get into details because I have the rights with that, but it was one of those things where I was very scared in telling anyone. I was convinced if I said something, this person was going to come out and hurt me when I was in high school. I was that scared. And then at that time, the teachers ultimately took my bully side, and it ended up having me being, in my eyes, wrongfully taken out of school for, I don't remember how long it was, but I knew it was at least like a good week. Like, I had a week of out of school suspension, and then I had a week of in school suspension, which to me wasn't fun. But if you do the, as I say, you do the crime, you do the time. So I did that. I learned from it, and that's where, like, I started putting my head down. That's where I just, the junior year is when I turned around and started focusing on my studies. I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to apply to I know I'm going to apply to college soon, so I got to get to that route, and I got to do that. And that's where, like, around junior year, specifically during the lacrosse season, there was tryouts. I thought I was going to make it to varsity, but they're like, oh no, you're still on freshman level at 16, 17 years old. So I ended up quitting. I didn't want to do the tryouts. I remember going to tryouts and trying to run around that track. No, mm-mm. When they told me, "Oh, you're gonna be on the freshman team," I quit right then and there for the girls lacrosse team. I quit right then and there, and then that's where I became a manager for the boys lacrosse team. That was an adventure in itself. And during that time frame as well, when I was managing the boys lacrosse team, from when I was 16 until I was 18, I loved being a manager for the boys team. It was really fun being able to have conversations with them. It was a lot of fun getting some advice. I had some of the guys coming up to me and talking to me about, "Oh, what do I give my girlfriend? What do I do this? What do I do that?" And I feel like that's when I become like a real tomboy, and I was like, "Okay, let me tell you how it goes. Let me tell you this, let me tell you that." And then other times I would have other guys that were bullying me on the boys lacrosse team. And I'm super thankful for one of the guys on the team. I'm not going to say his name, but if you're out there listening, you know who you are. This person told me all of the ins and outs of what not to do. And he knew I was neurodivergent. And when another kid, one of his friends, was bullying me on the lacrosse team and was being mean towards me, I straight up told this guy, I was like, "Hey, so and so is like bullying me. They're calling me names. They're saying this, this, and this about me." So, what that guy did, he went up to the coach and said, "Hey, Destiny's getting bullied. You need to do something about this person. That's not cool." And ultimately, the other person got reprimanded by the coach, and then the coach brought everyone in together that we don't bully other people on the team. We are all a team here. We're all one individual unity together. And I'm still forever grateful for that opportunity because that's where I would never have thought that someone who defends me stayed friends with me, unfortunately lost touch to that person just because of growing up and being out of high school and all that stuff. But I'm beyond appreciative of that experience, that because that experience taught me that you can talk to other people and that you're not alone when it comes to bullying. And after I was a manager for the boys lacrosse team, and I was involved with the Gay Straight Alliance Club, which was I think it's SGA or GSA, and I was trying to be actively involved during my junior and senior year because I was trying to write college applications. I was trying to do this. I was wanting to do that. I've always wanted to continue my education. So I ended up going to a school for neurodivergence. I got accepted. I went up there on the fly and everything, and the campus was great. At first, it was hard for me to like fit into college. I'm not gonna lie, it was hard, but thankfully, my college had enough resources of where they had something called a DCAS center, which is an academic support center for people who are struggling in learning. All of the professors were extremely supportive and understanding about, I call it LDs for short, which is a learning disability, and having a peers group and social pragmatics. And they also had counseling on the campus. Like they had so many resources. I was beyond appreciative. I felt like I belonged. I had such a fun, awesome group of people. And I did a 4-year program for business communications and entrepreneurial leadership. That's my bachelor's degree. I'm very proud of myself. I got a bachelor's degree and I did college within 4 years. I graduated in 2022. However, unfortunately, I got COVID the day I was originally supposed to walk. And even while during all of that, and this is going to turn into today, during my it was either my junior or my senior year where I had a class my one of my semesters. It was called radio broadcasting, and I had a great professor. He was awesome, and we would just write our own episodes each week. We would take one day a week where we would go to the radio broadcasting, and I loved it. And for other people who do not know, the channel is called WLMC. So that is the radio station for my college. It's still an awesome radio station, and I give so many people kudos for going along with it and still doing radio broadcasting. And I feel like I'm doing something similar to that. So that's also kind of what made me wanted to do a podcast, was because I originally wanted to do it when I was in college, but I was hesitant because somebody was already doing a podcast of their life and being neurodivergent in their 20s during that time frame. So I didn't want, as I call it, I didn't want to steal someone else's thunder. That's crazy. And during all of that, after COVID and me just starting out what I have now, my almost 5 years committed relationship, and I'm not going to lie to you, when I got out of school, it was pretty easy for me to get into the workforce because I was really good about CVs, resumes, interviews. I love getting interviewed. It was one of my superpowers. I feel like it's one of my favorite things to do. And to be honest, I went through a lot of different jobs before I realized I wanted to be in where I am now, which is early childhood education. And I'm looking forward. I'm so excited to continue going through the journey of getting my certificate in this course. When I originally thought I wanted to work in business, try to work in corporate, that lasted me about 6 months. Yeah. But outside of all of that and me being adopted and learning about what my different things are with being neurodivergent and all these things. But before I forget, because I'm going to forget this as well, I have something called reactive attachment disorder. The reason why I didn't mention it quite in the beginning because it also spans throughout my entire life, and I still have moments where it's hard for me. So reactive attachment disorder, or RAD for short. I'm not a dictionary. I'm going off of what I personally know. So if people want to put down the actual Google definition for it, they can go right ahead. But to my definition of reactive attachment disorder, it is someone who struggles with relationships, maintaining them, friendships, all that type of stuff. So the reason why I'm mentioning it now after I got out of college is because I feel like that's where, at least to me, relationships and friendships got really hard as I'm going through post grad. And in my brain, I'm like, okay, I'm still a college student. I can still hang out with my boyfriend's college buddies. I can still do this. I can still do that. No, it's something that I'm still trying to maneuver around with relationships now and friendships. And that's always been something I've always struggled with. I still struggle with social cues, but I feel like not as bad as before because I have been fortunate to have different resources, peer groups, and being able to help socialize in other different aspects. And I'm not clickbaiting this group of this what's it called, group or company, but I absolutely loved going to the Ascent Autism groups to help out with social interactions postgraduate. And it actually helped me maintain now some new friendships, which I am beyond appreciative of. And I know now that I can take a deep breath, I can listen to what someone else is saying without interrupting, because that's some of the stuff that I've done previously, which is jump into a conversation without knowing anything of what's going on, not listening to what the other person's saying, understanding their perspective, trying to go into other people's shoes, which that is something I still struggle with day to day, but I'm slowly getting better, and I ask for all of the help and the conversations with it. I'm also not going to lie, when it came to me being neurodivergent and autistic, that's also one of the other things I had a hard time releasing out to my jobs, because I felt like it was hard for me to try to find work and trying to follow along. And I feel like in my head, that's why I've always struggled trying to work in corporate, was because the one time I did, I got fired within a 6 month time frame because I couldn't make quota. Ultimately, sales and business is not for everyone, which is why I learned that early childcare education is more of my flow, more of my style. And I feel like with me being neurodivergent, I can get down on their level where I can play around with them and show them through play and welcome and open their wild imagination. But I can also take a step back if I feel like something is not safe, and I can say to them, hey, that's not a safe choice. Let's put our safe feet. Let's have kind feet and safe kind hands and safe feet on the ground, and talk in all of this different type of language, which now in these days these kids should know and understand. While I'm still learning as a neurodivergent in their 20s, and as I told you guys, a small generalized story of my stuff with me, giving you guys generalization as to why I started the podcast, my background with being autistic, and I'm very excited to have you guys come along on the road with me to talk about not more, excuse me, different topics as being a neurodivergent in their 20s, and where I'll be having some people interview with me. I'll have some people be on board with different conversations I have. There's going to be happiness, there's going to be sadness, there's going to be anger, there's going to be frustration, there's going to be anxiety, there's going to be all these different topics communicated in a safe space where we don't feel judged, misled, misunderstood. And I am excited for people to be able to listen more to my story, but also hopefully it can connect to any of you guys out there who are, whether they're neurodivergent on the autism spectrum, or just living life in their 20s and just trying to figure it out. Nobody's path is perfect, nobody's path is linear, and everybody's life is unique, and everyone draws their own lines and always. So, as I say to people, and this is why I say to everyone, your life is like a roller coaster. There's ups, there's downs, there's bumps and turns and all of these things. But at the end of it, I want people to think of one thing that they think that they were never going to do as a kid that they're doing now. And as I say to everyone here, I had to steal another sip of my seven brew. Think about this. There's progress over perfection. And I want people to try to think what that means. Progress over perfection. I hope everyone has a great day or a great night, whatever time frame that you are watching. And I cannot wait to see you guys in the next episode. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.